situation to be in. But I guess the kind of soldiers that would be the happy ones are the ones that are on the victorious side. And they're the ones that are truly soldiers, and they're not have one foot in one army and one foot in the other army. It's those who are true soldiers of Christ that are on the winning side. Those are the ones that can be happy. And I commend this group for having a desire to spread the gospel in a place like this. Some of those things that we talked about last night. What I've been wanting to share, starting last night, continuing tonight, is not something that is a magic bullet. Like if you approach skeptics or secular people with this, then all of them are going to be converted. And we know that there's no evangelistic approach that's a silver magic bullet. Because still the Bible teaches that most people are going to choose the narrow gate, or the wide gate that leads to destruction. It's only a few that choose the narrow one. But what I'm hoping to accomplish for yesterday, today, and tomorrow is add another tool in the toolbox on how we can converse with people around us. We live in a society that is increasingly openly skeptical of God and the Bible. And we're also in a society that's less and less objectively minded. Some of the discussions and questions that I had with some of you even last night were very engaging, very good questions, thoughtful reflections from the things that we talked about last night. And I'm going to try to loop some of that in, if I remember to, as we go through this lesson on our need for meaning. But remember that in our society, the reason why a lot of people say that they are skeptical is because they are rational. They've learned facts and data. But if you peel back those arguments that they bring up, oftentimes what you're going to find causing unbelief is some kind of an emotional reaction. Somebody has a desire to sin. Somebody had a bad religious experience. Somebody has peer pressure or social pressure from not wanting to look like the odd one out in their college or their workplace or something like that. So how do you reason with people in an age that's like that? And Jesus, one of the things that Jesus would talk about and one of the appeals that he would give to people, we looked at the one in John chapter 4 last night where Jesus talked to the woman at the well and said that you can have this water that is to everlasting life. In John chapter 7 verse 37, Jesus says, if anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink. Can you imagine being out at the temple complex where Jesus said this at the Feast of Booths? And you see somebody just stand up and declare this about himself. What's going on in your mind about somebody like that would say such a thing? Well, you're crazy. Who would make this kind of claim about themselves? But this is the way that Jesus would appeal to people at times, and we see it especially so in the Gospel of John, that you guys have deep emotional needs. And subjectively, within yourself, there are things that are lacking because you're not following the Good Shepherd. You're following the shepherd that's going to steal and kill and destroy you. And so one of the deep needs that I think Satan steals from people is our need for meaning. In fact, Viktor Frankl was a Jewish psychoanalyst at a Nazi concentration camp. And he wrote a great book called Man's Search for Meaning. And after the war, maybe before he started developing this, he called it logotherapy. And this is what he describes it as. Logotherapy regards its assignment as that of assisting the patient to find meaning in his life. This is what he found in the Jewish concentration camps. That if I can help somebody have meaning in life, they can endure all kinds of suffering. And if you have a meaning in life that transcends the things of this life, then you have a certain kind of strength and buoyancy that nobody else is going to have. How would you describe what meaning is? Meaning has a component where you look backwards and you look forwards. Meaning says, this is my origin, this is why I'm here, and it looks forward to say, this is what I'm going to leave behind, or there's going to be something about final judgment, or my demise, and my meaning will have some kind of trajectory towards that. And so what I want to do in this, and I prompted us a little bit last night on this, is we're going to look at some ways that a skeptical person or a secular person would seek to find meaning in life, and then compare that to the biblical worldview. And since we're a one-eyed church tonight, all of the things will be right over here. All right, so how would a skeptical or a secular person try to find meaning in life? And by the way, do you think that it would be fair to assume that a non-Christian does have meaning in their life? I think it's a fair assumption that they would have a way of developing meaning in life. Of course they do. And so I'm going to show you some quotes that I show when I study with skeptics. And by the way, let me just point this out now, that I'm going to show you a lot of quotes from skeptics and atheists. I am not suggesting that you need to go read all of these atheists to be able to reason with secular people. What we're doing here is firming up our faith, challenging us and asking ourselves, are you really finding your meaning in God, or have you been influenced by the secular mindset? And we're going to get some pointers of some things you could bring up in a conversation, but you don't need to know all of these quotes to do that. And so, you'll see what I mean as we go through this. So, how would a secular person try to find meaning in life? Here's some of the quotes that I've shown to atheists as I've studied with them. Here's one from a guy named Fabian Suchanek. And he says, the purpose of life must be the intention that the creator of life pursued with his creation. Now, unfortunately, there is no such creator in the atheist worldview. Thus, the notion of purpose in life in the sense of intention of the creator is undefined in the atheist world. For atheists, there is no God-given purpose of life. All right, so I've shown this to skeptics before. They said, yes, I agree with this. We have no God that has assigned meaning to us. So there's no God that's told us this is why we're here. There's no God that's going to give us final judgment day. So there's a very real sense in which, objectively speaking, we don't have meaning in life. Now, but this does not mean that a skeptic wouldn't say, but this is how I find meaning. So look at this quote from Dr. Adam Rutherford, and he's British, and that will matter for how he spells some of this stuff. A meaningless universe does not mean that we live our lives without purpose. I'm an atheist, but I try to live my life replete with purpose. Be kind, learn and discover as much as you can, share that knowledge, relieve suffering when you can, have tonnes of fun. That's how they say tons. That's why it's not pointless. We have the power to create life and to show those lives wonders. Surely that's enough. It is for me. All right, this sounds great. You know, this is just really beautiful. All right, if you want to find meaning in life, how about this? How about you be kind to people? Just like random acts of kindness. You ever had one of those times when you go through Starbucks and you ordered a drink that was going to be like $12, and then the person in front of you paid for it, and you're like, wow, that person is just really living out their meaning in life. And you want to do the same thing for the next person. I'm just going to do a random act of kindness today. I'm just going to be kind to people. That's great. Okay, so what about learn and discover as much as you can? You know, I like to read books. I like to listen to podcasts. I like to hear people's interesting stories, and I like to discover as many things as as I discover more and more things, I like to share that knowledge with other people. I think that's really cool. I like to relieve suffering when I can. You know, it feels really good to be able to help other people. And who doesn't love to have tonnes of fun? I mean, fun is just always fun to have. And so you put all that together, and you're like, well, do you see what's wrong with that? I'm afraid that there are a lot of Christians that would look at this, and if you leave out the atheist part, they would go, well, that's exactly how I find my meaning in life. There's no problem with this. When I've shown this quote, especially to skeptics, they've gone, yes, I love that quote. That's exactly what I believe. That describes how I look at my meaning in life precisely. All right. What are the weaknesses of the secular approach? The secular approach says there's no objective meaning, but I can find meaning for myself, and this is what I find it in. All right, here's some weaknesses of it. First of all, this approach to meaning in life cannot apply to everyone in the world. And we can say it this way. If your worldview can't apply to everybody in the world, it's a bad worldview. Think about the things that he just brought up as the things that he likes to do that give him meaning. Can everyone learn, discover, and share things with other people? That not everybody can do that. There are certain people that don't have the kind of education opportunities. There's other people that have all kinds of things that would prevent them from being able to share the things that they learn with other people. What about relieve suffering? The guy that I trained with, Barry Kircheville, He told me one time about, he was in India, and there was a guy that people would bring to the street, and they would like lay out a jacket for him, and people would put money down for him, and he had no arms and no legs. Can you imagine Dr. Adam Rutherford going up to that guy in India and going, hey, I know life must really be tough for you, but here's how you find meaning in life. Try to relieve suffering for other people. How can that possibly apply to me? What about, can everybody have tones of fun? Do you think that guy in India can have tones of... Do you see that for somebody to say that my meaning in life is all of these kinds of things, the only kind of person that can say something like that is somebody that's coming from a place of privilege. Most people in the world can't resonate with what Adam Rutherford has said. And so if you say this is where you get your meaning in life, you have no idea what most of the world's population lives in. And so that's one problem to think about with this. It can't apply to everybody in the world. Here's another problem. Well, it's vexing to think about. If you try to think deeply about your meaning in life, and that's, just have fun and share things and all this kind of stuff, if you think deeply about life's biggest questions, this is going to come crashing in on you from time to time, and you're going to feel like you've got problems with depression, you've got problems with not feeling satisfied, and I'm going to tease this out, but I'm going to do this first of all with a quote from Leo Tolstoy. Leo Tolstoy is the Russian writer that wrote War and Peace, but he wrote a series of short religious books. And one of those books that he wrote is called Confessions. And in his Confessions, he writes about his story of being a secular person and becoming somebody who believes in God and the Bible. I don't know what he believed about how to be saved, but he at least got to a point where he believed in God and he believed in the Bible. And look at part of what got him there. Look at this quote. I could give no reasonable meaning to any single action or to my whole life. Sooner or later, my affairs, whatever they may be, will be forgotten and I shall not exist. Then why go on making any effort? How can man fail to see this? And how go on living? This is what is surprising. One can only live while one is intoxicated with life. As soon as one is sober, it is impossible not to see that it is all a mere fraud and a stupid fraud. That is precisely what it is. There is nothing either amusing or witty about it. It is simply cruel and stupid. He was the most famous guy in Russia at this time. His body was still in good condition. He had a big farm. He made a lot of money, very famous. He had everything that anybody would ever want. And look at what he says here. There's times where I couldn't give a reasonable meaning to any action. I had a garden in my backyard. Why do I have that garden? Or I couldn't give any reasonable meaning to my whole life. I've looked at all the things that I've ever done, and I just keep realizing that everything's going to be stench and worms one day. What's the point of continuing? Notice that he says one can only live while one is intoxicated with life. What does he mean by that? I think he's saying here that there are times I can get on my life not feeling depressed, not feeling like this, and it's when I'm thinking like a drunk person. It doesn't mean he's literally getting drunk, but he's saying as long as I just think shallowly about everything. And one way that you can think about this, Dylan and I and Asher today went to a museum, the Museum of the Bible. I don't know what the etymology of the word museum is, but M-U-S-E, to muse. What does it mean to muse? To think deeply about something. What is the Museum of the Bible trying to get you to do? To think deeply about the origins of the Bible, the influence of the Bible, all that sort of thing. What is amusement? Somebody who is theistic is somebody who believes in God. What is an atheist? Somebody who's without God. What does it mean to amuse yourself? To be without thinking. So you just do all this scrolling on social media, all these videos of things that have no real meaning to your life. And our culture is filled with people that are just amusing themselves to death, to quote the title of a book. Now, why do you think so many people just go on thinking like a drunk person? I don't want to think deeply about anything. I just want to distract myself. I don't want anybody to ask me questions about what my meaning in life is. I'm satisfied with the way that things are. Here's a quote from an atheist named Will Storr. And he says, we know this, how this ends. You're going to die, and so will everyone you love. By the way, this was the beginning of his book, like the first sentence of the book. Human life, in all its noise and hubris, will be rendered meaningless for eternity. The cure for the horror is story. Our brains distract us from this terrible truth by filling our lives with hopeful goals and encouraging us to strive for them. It gives our existence the illusion of meaning and turns our gaze from the dread. Here's what Will Storr says. Yes, our lives are meaningless, and the best you can do is distract yourself and find the illusion of meaning. All right, if you're a skeptic, an atheist, somebody who's living without God, this is what your people are saying. This is not what Christians are saying. This guy's an atheist. He says the best you got is the illusion of meaning. So we fill ourselves with Netflix, YouTube videos, things that are not deep thinking kinds of things. Because to actually think deeply about meaning in life and all that is just depressing, because my worldview doesn't give that to me. Viktor Frankl, by the way, picking up with this kind of idea, look what Viktor Frankl said. The drug scene is one aspect of a more general mass phenomenon, namely the feeling of meaninglessness resulting from a frustration of our existential needs. Why is it that so many people resort to narcotics? I remember there's a time in California where I started studying with a guy. I met him when he was in his early 40s. And we start studying, and he comes back to me the next week after we started getting to know each other. He says, so I got to tell you something. I've been smoking marijuana since I was 13. I saw my brother commit suicide right in front of me. And ever since I was 13, every time there was something difficult in my life, I was smoking marijuana to deal with it. What do you think I should do? And I said, well, I think that God has got ways of helping you look at the world that wouldn't have to rely on a narcotic like that. And if you drink in the things of the Spirit, He'll help you know how to look at the world in a different way. And for the next week, he didn't smoke anything. And we get back together the next week, and he says, Eric, I had no idea how ugly the world was. I had forgotten how bad everything was. Because every time anything was kind of bad, I would resort to my drugs. Do you know what happens when people don't want to think deeply about things and they're just going to go to the bottle, or they're going to go to that guy on the street that they can buy those things from? What you do is you cryogenically freeze your emotional maturity at whatever age you started doing those drugs. Because here's a 42-year-old now, and guess how emotionally mature he was? A 13-year-old. They call that arrested development. If you don't have a worldview that lets you handle the difficulties of this world, that gives you a real bolstered sense of meaning, Viktor Frankl is saying things like, I've seen a lot of people get on narcotics because they don't have a worldview that gives them a sense of meaning in life. Now, that's one problem. That's one of the problems. It's vexing to think deeply if your meaning in life is built off of the things of this world. But here's a third problem with it. Third problem with this perspective is that eventually suffering is going to come into your life. Bertrand Russell was an atheist who said this: for the young there is nothing unattainable, a good thing desired with the whole force of a passionate will, and yet impossible is to them not credible. Yet by death, by illness, by poverty, or by the voice of duty, we must learn, each one of us, that the world was not made for us, and that however beautiful may be the things we crave, fate may nevertheless forbid them. What he's saying here is that there's something that young people refuse to believe. Young people refuse to believe that if they desire a good thing and they've got a passionate will towards it, that there should never be a reason I can't get those things. Have you ever seen a young person who thinks that they can conquer the world, they can do whatever they set their mind to do, all that sort of thing? And then here Bertrand Russell says, yeah, but death could happen. And that's not just the death of you. If you put all your meaning in life in your family, like look, I got a wife and 4 kids. Let's say my wife is driving around in her van with all 4 of the kids, and I'm not with her, and she gets in a tragic car accident and they all die. And my meaning in life was wrapped up in my family. Look what suffering did for them. If you make your meaning in life the things of this world, something's going to make you separated from that eventually. Illness. There was a time when I was in Minnesota, and I was preaching at a little church of about 10 people. And there was another church down the road, and we had some doctrinal differences. And I started getting together with some of those members of the church to try to see if we could combine churches and work through. And there was one of those guys there that I disagreed with on some things, but he was a good man. And there was one time he came up to me and he said, "Hey Eric, do you know why there's so many old cranky people in the world?" His words, not mine. And I said, "No, but I really want to know why there's so many old cranky people in the world, because I don't want to become one of those people." And he, referencing Ecclesiastes chapter 12. Do you remember in Ecclesiastes chapter 12 where it talks about the deterioration of the human body? And that passage begins by talking about remember your Creator in the days of your youth, because there's coming times that you'll say, "I have no pleasure in these days." So he went on to explain that when a young person puts all of their meaning in life in sports, or music, or food, or whatever else, a myriad of things that people can be interested in, eventually age is going to strip that away from you, and age or illness, I'm using it as a synonym for that, illness is going to come, age is going to come, and it's going to make it so you can't do all the things that you used to love to do. So how about this? How about you enjoy the things that you can enjoy at the age you can enjoy them, but make God the center of everything the whole way through. And that means as you get older and you can't go skiing anymore, or you can't do this or that it's not going to crush me because God was always my God. And so there are some people that go, "Well, yeah, my meaning in life is sports." And then you got NFL players that have to retire by the time they're 32 years old because their knees are so banged up. Meaning in life has been stripped away from you. What about poverty? Things outside of your control. The stock market. You know, I was building this nest egg and I was going to buy this or that, and then things outside of my control took all of that away. What does he mean by the voice of duty? All right, here, let me just say something that I've noticed about young people lately. Like people that are college age or something like that. I know some people that are in this age category and they think they're going to be rock stars. Like literally. Like they're going to become really famous musicians one day. Or if that's not going to be what happens to them, they will have a very famous YouTube channel. And they're going to be a content creator, and everybody's going to think that they're really cool, and they got that forced energy when they stand behind a mic, and everybody that's watching, all the 6 million people that watch them, they're going to be so impressed with them. How about, okay, here's your problem. The voice of duty comes and it says, you have bills to pay, quite literally. And your pipe dream of what you want to do with your life one day is not going to be attained. You got to go get a job and start paying the bills. The voice of duty. How many things do young people say? Yeah, my meaning in life can be this, or it can be that. And there's all kinds of things outside of your control that are going to strip it away. Now, let's just review what the weaknesses are, just to hold this all in our mind. If the secular approach to meaning is, yeah, there's no objective meaning, there's no God, but as long as I live in this life, I'm going to find meaning in things in this life. What are the weaknesses of that approach? It can't apply to everybody. There are people that live in abject poverty that will never be able to resonate with that. It's vexing to think about. Because at the end of the day, you're still going to die, and all you're going to have is the illusion of meaning. So just don't think deeply about it. Ironically, isn't it interesting that skeptics would like to pose themselves as those who think deeply, and then you start challenging them about meaning in life and whether or not you really have it, and they go, well, you know, let's just not think too much about that. Well, I thought you were the deep thinker. Or thirdly, suffering is going to come, and in one way or another, it's going to remove you from the things that you found meaning in. All right, so this is not just a matter of, and by the way, again, you don't need to know all the quotes. You could just bring up these points. If somebody says, oh yeah, so like what's your meaning in life? You're at a coffee shop. By the way, one of the things that I used to do a lot, especially in California, is I would make my office a Starbucks or a coffee shop in the area, and I'd have my Bible out on the table, and I'd be writing my sermons or getting my Bible classes ready, and somebody would walk by and go, "Oh, cool, you got a Bible," or "Oh, not cool, you have a Bible," and both of those things happen. And I'd get into conversations with people that way. As you guys seek to be evangelistic in this area, whatever you guys are studying on Sunday mornings or Wednesday nights, could you not use your home office to get ready for those classes? Could you go to a coffee shop, have your Bible open, and maybe the first 5 times you're not going to get into any conversation, but if you go somewhere regular enough, could you get to know the workers there? Could you get to see who the regular customers are? Could that be a way of opening up some opportunities? It's something that I've done and it's worked. There's other people that I've met that do the same thing and it's worked for them, just throwing that out there. But if you were to meet somebody who is a skeptic, could you say like, hey, well, where do you find your meaning in life? I'm a Christian, what do I do? Well, I'm not a Christian. How do you find meaning in life? Well, I find it in my family or my work or whatever, something like that. Oh yeah, that's interesting. Like, have you ever thought that couldn't apply to everybody? However you want to bring up these points, you see the idea. All right, so it's not just that what we want to do is remove something from somebody. What we want to do is add what the Bible provides with regards to meaning in life. So what is the biblical approach to meaning in life? I'm going to bring up 3 things briefly about this. The first thing is that the Bible teaches that we're made in God's image. In Genesis 1, 26 and 27, it says it in a couple different ways, a couple different times, that we are made in God's image. This is the first thing that the Bible says about people. Now, what does it mean that we're made in God's image? Does that mean that we physically look like Him? I don't think that's the idea. There's another time that this same Hebrew word is used in the Bible, and it's used in Numbers chapter 33, verse 52. It says about the Canaanites, "You shall drive out all the inhabitants of the land from before you and destroy all their figured stones and destroy all their metal images and demolish all their high places." Do you know that the same Hebrew word, that you're made in God's image, is used to describe the images of the false gods that people worshipped? Which would mean that, like, if you got the temple of Dagon, you'd have a statue, an image of Dagon, and you were to ask the Philistines, is this literally Dagon? They'd say, oh, no. This is a representation of Dagon, so that when we pray and we look at this image, it helps us think about the God to whom we're requesting things from, and whatever. And so that's the same term. What is an image? An image is a picture, it's a snapshot. When God says in the Bible that you don't make any carved images of me, just imagine for a moment that we were going to go ahead and all commit idolatry. And I was going to go around the room and ask all of you, hey, if we're going to make a carved image of God, what animal would you pick? Somebody says a squid because they want to be cool. And then somebody else goes, well, like a lamb, because that's more in the Bible. And then somebody else says, well, I would do like a lion. And then you got the lion and the lamb person. And you go, well, you guys are both missing something. You lion person, you're missing the fact that God is really gentle. And then you lamb person, you're missing the fact that God has wrath. If you try to reduce God to one carved image, do you realize that you're trying to reduce Him down in a simple way? You're trying to communicate in a simple way a complex God. You're trying to get a snapshot. If you take a picture of me and I'm smiling, does that describe how I am all the time? No, that image doesn't describe fully who I am. But there is one thing in creation that God says does adequately image me. And that's human beings. It doesn't matter what skin color you are. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter what level of education you are. It doesn't matter what kind of ability you have to think about things. Every human being. And so this worldview fits everybody in the world. Everybody's dignified with being made in the image of God. This means, by the way, that my purpose in life is to be an imager of Him. Now, if you've got a pair of shoes that have got like a swoop on them, what company do you think of? Nike. That's their logo. That's their image. God's plan for the world was that He was going to create people. The only thing that was suitable to be an imager of Him. and set them up all over the world, all of these people that would look to God's character and reflect it and imitate it. And the whole world would be filled with His glory. You know what your purpose in life is? It's to be an image of God. That when you read in the Bible about His kindness, you're learning something about what your mission in life is. When you read something in the Bible about His righteous anger, you're learning about the things that you can be angry about. All right, let me just make one point of application from this. If I'm reading the Bible and studying the Bible, and the only thing I'm ever doing is looking at rules and regulations, and we got to do that because that's part of studying the Bible. If I'm never asking myself the question, what does this teach me about God? We're not getting to the heart of what our purpose in life is. We're supposed to see passages in the Scripture and learn about who God is, and what we learn about God is then supposed to be reflected back into the world the best we can as imagers of God. Sometimes brethren will listen to podcasts made by brethren. Sometimes people will read books or blogs, and it's all just a bunch of self-help stuff that doesn't help you see who God is. When you see God's character, you're tapping into what your purpose is, because that's what you're supposed to reflect. All right, so the first thing that the Bible teaches about human beings is that you're made in God's image, and it applies to everybody. But here's another thing to bring up about this. Do you remember how Bertrand Russell had brought up that suffering can take away your meaning in life? Death, poverty, illness, all that sort of thing. Is that true for the Christian? In 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 6 and 7, it says, "In this you rejoice, though now for a little while, if necessary, you've been grieved by various trials, so that the tested genuineness of your faith, more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ." All right, the audience of 1 Peter is going through all kinds of suffering. They've been displaced from their homeland. There's marriage problems in the church. There's economic problems. They're being spoken against as evildoers. And I want to point out that in verse 6, he says that you guys have been grieved. There was a time when I was in college and I was getting to know a girl who was religious but misguided. And I said a little bit about my family background yesterday. There was one of the times, I think it was when I had told my parents that I was thinking about preaching. And that dinner was terrible. You know, I mean, the food was probably fine. But, like, it was World War III, like what happened every night. Couldn't fall asleep that night. And then I get to school the next day, 40-minute drive to school, and I get out of the car, and this girl parked next to me, and we're walking into the school together. And she's, you know, she believes in the Bible, but she's misguided about a lot of things. And she's like, "How are you doing today? You seem kind of down." And I'm like, "Things are really rough right now." She looked at me with kind of like a rebuking kind of face and tone, and she said, "Every day should be joyful in the Lord." Oh, thank you. That was very helpful. You know, I just really appreciated you saying that to me. Does the Bible acknowledge that grief is something Christians can go through? Can a Christian have joy and tears at the same time? Yeah, they can. So the audience of 1 Peter, you guys are going through lots of things. Your grief is real. You don't have to act like it's not real. But even though you're going through all of this, what's it doing for you? Your faith is compared to gold. That the way you refine it is through the fire, and these trials are making you more and more stamped into the image of the one who created you. You realize that for the Christian, suffering does not remove us from our meaning in life. It drives us deeper into it. And you think back at the times in your own life when you were going through the most difficult things. Are those the times that you prayed the most? Are those the times that you received a lot of help from brethren, and it touched your heart, and it made you more humble, and it made you think about being kind to other people? The times that you've been through difficulties are times that God did not take your meaning in life away from you. It's when you were driven deeper into it. So we're immune from suffering. Notice the last thing, though. The Bible teaches that there is final judgment day. And this is kind of a weird thing to think about, how this would give us meaning. But Ecclesiastes 12, verses 13 and 14 says, "The end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments. For this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment, with every secret thing, whether good or evil." Solomon, now, we can look at this passage at the end of Ecclesiastes and go, well, it kind of just seems like a downer here. Like there's Judgment Day and all that. I'd argue that in the flow of thought of the book of Ecclesiastes, this is good news. This is like a climactic, like, wow, there's Judgment Day. Because what's happening in Ecclesiastes is Solomon has gone, all right, I'm going to try to find meaning in life under the sun, apart from God. And I tried to find meaning in life in wealth, and that didn't do it for me. I tried to find it in being well-known, and that didn't do it for me. I tried to find it in women, and that didn't do it for me either. I tried to find it in wine, and that didn't do it either for me. I tried to do it in my work. I tried to build great things, and that didn't do it for me either. And I tried to find, all these things, and none of them gave me meaning in life, but, there's finally something that makes my life meaningful, and that's the fact that there's a Judgment Day. Because I couldn't figure out why anything I did mattered. I couldn't figure out why my whole life mattered, but if this passage is true, that we're going to be brought into judgment for every secret thing, that means suddenly every single thing you do matters. If you're going to be held to account for it. This is good news in the book of Ecclesiastes. And do you know what the Bible teaches on that day when he returns for those who have been seeking him? 1 John chapter 3, verse 2, Behold, we are God's children now, and what we will be has not yet appeared, but we know that when he appears, we shall be like him, because we shall see him as he is. In this room right now, we've got all these light bulbs up here. The light bulbs are covered by something that you can't fully see through to make it so that the brightness doesn't affect us quite as badly. The lamps that you have in your houses, they have lamp shades on it so that you don't look right at the light. You know why they make lamp shades? It's because if there was no lamp shades, it would hurt our eyes because we'd be seeing the full glory of those light bulbs everywhere we go. Every time God has appeared to people in the Bible, He's always been withholding some of his glory. He never shows himself in all of his glory to anybody. But the Bible teaches that one day, we're going to be so transformed and suited to be able to see him in all of his glory and not die. But that's only going to be for those who sought out being an image of him, who allowed the suffering in their life to train them to become more and more into an image of his son. The biblical approach of finding meaning in life, everybody's created to be an imager of God. Suffering drives us deeper into our meaning. It doesn't take us away from it. And Judgment Day makes everything that we do matter. Now you just think for a moment and you compare the secular worldview to this. Secular worldview says, I try to find meaning in the things in this life, and eventually it's going to be stripped away from you. And then here's the biblical approach to meaning, and everybody needs meaning in life. Which one can withstand the difficulties of life? Which one fits how you seem to be designed? The biblical approach does. Do you see that it's in your best interest that this is true because your worldview is not giving it to you? Now, this is going to be the same kind of thing that we're going to do tomorrow with our need for morality and our need for hope. Compare the secular worldview to the Christian worldview, and then just ask the question, which one seems to fit our needs best? For now, we're about to sing the song, It Is Well With My Soul. And many of you probably know that Horatio Spafford wrote this song when he was on a boat, and he had found out that his daughters had died. And when he found out that his daughters had died, he penned this song that was all about that when I go through something difficult, that it is still well with my soul. The skeptic, who has all of their meaning in life bound up in their 401k, could never say that when trials come, when difficulties come. The person who's put all of their stock in things in this world could never say such a thing. But we who are Christians who serve the Lord can say this no matter what happens in our life. If there's anybody here tonight that's not been finding your meaning in God, that's not been focused on the Lord like you ought to, this is an opportunity to get your life right with God. Ask yourself, has being an imager of God been the thing that matters more to you than anything else? Have you been thinking in view of future judgment day and the fact that you're going to have to stand before God and how that means everything that you do matters? Are you living with that perspective? If there's anything that we can do for you, please come forward while we stand.
So when peace